You're calling for a $50 an hour federal minimum wage. That's 7 times the current national minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Can you explain how that would be economically sustainable for small businesses? You have 60 seconds.
Barbara Lee, by proposing a $50 minimum wage, is an economic moron. Representative Barbara Lee in California. Now, she's a Marxist, and she has a great proposal for our country. She's running for Senate in California. And let me just tell you something. Of the 3 Democrats that are running for Senate in California, she's the worst of the lot, but it's close. Because right now, if a Democrat wins this race in California for senator, you're going to get either this communist maniac, Barbara Lee, or you're going to get insane, ridiculous anger management problem, Katie Porter, or you're going to get lying, deceitful, pencil-necked Adam Schiff. Those are the choices for Democrats right now. And thank God, LA Dodgers Major League Baseball Hall of Famer Steve Garvey is running for the Republicans, and he's looking pretty good for a novice in the political game. So we'll see what happens. Right now, it looks like it's going to be Adam Schiff versus Steve Garvey. But let's take a quick look at communist Barbara Lee, who's pushing now for a $50 minimum wage. Can I say that again? Because I want to make sure you heard me correctly. I'm not saying $15. No. 50, 50, 5 tens, half $100. She wants a $50 minimum wage. Watch now the brilliance of Democrat economic philosophy.
You're calling for a $50 an hour federal minimum wage. That's 7 times the current national minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Can you explain how that would be economically sustainable for small businesses? You have 60 seconds.
First, let me say I owned and ran a small business for 11 years. I created hundreds of jobs, benefits, retirement benefits, also healthcare benefits. I know what worker productivity means, and that means that you have to make sure that your employees are taken care of and have a living wage. In the Bay Area, I believe it was the United Way, came out with a report that very recently, $127,000 for a family of 4 is just barely enough to get by. Another survey very recently, $104,000 for a family of 1, barely enough to get by. Low income because of the affordability crisis. And so just do the math. Of course, we have national minimum wages that we need to raise to a living wage. You're talking about $20, $25, fine. But I have got to be focused on what California needs and what the affordability factor is when we calculate this wage.
So I'm sorry, Congresswoman. The question was, how in the hell does this make any sense? And how are you going to make this work? She sort of avoided that question, didn't she? She is right, though. I mean, it is absolutely impossible to live in the Bay Area in California. It's possible to live in most places in California. Inflation is absolutely sky high. Things cost too much. And by the way, with the highest taxes, literally the highest taxes in the country, you're also getting no law enforcement, nobody going to jail. You've got people urinating and defecating and in some cases fornicating on the streets due to their criminal vagrant homeless crisis. You've got people doing drugs on the streets. You've got people going into the stores and clearing the shelves and shoplifting with garbage bags full of goods, and no one's doing anything and no one's getting arrested. And if they do get arrested, no one's pressing charges. And if they do press charges, no one's going to jail. It is completely unlivable, but the problem isn't that there is a high enough minimum wage. The problem is, well, I don't know. Let me walk you through this, Representative Lee. The Bay Area, you say? I'm sorry. Who's the dominant party running the Bay Area for the last 50 years? That would be the Democrats, wouldn't it? In the County Council of San Francisco, county supervisors, and the mayor of San Francisco. And you're a congresswoman from there. What party do you belong to? Oh, that would be the Democrats as well. And by the way, what party is dominating the state legislature in Sacramento there? That would be the Democrats as well. And what party has been the governor of California for the last 20 plus years? That would be your party, the Democrats. At any point here, do you think maybe the problem is you? Maybe the call is coming from inside the house? No. The real problem here is the companies aren't paying their employees $50 an hour. By the way, I mean, no offense to the moderator there from KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles, but you might have also asked the good Congresswoman what a $50 an hour minimum wage at McDonald's would do to the price of a quarter pounder. I'm just saying. You might have asked it that way. But I got to tell you, after hearing that answer from Barbara Lee, I'm starting to change my mind about economics and the viability of a minimum wage. And I got to tell you something. I think Barbara Lee, Representative Barbara Lee of the Bay Area of California running for Senate, is a tool. She is a capitalist tool for the corporate pigs that are keeping American workers down. How dare she? $50? I am right now stating for the record, and I want everyone to hear this, I think we should have a $500 an hour minimum wage. Now you're talking. Now that's going to fix the problem. $50? You can't live on that. Give me a break. No. We need to have a $500 minimum wage. All the economists agree. Every brilliant economist out there will tell you that when you raise the minimum wage as high as you possibly can, and then even higher, that helps everybody involved. Look at this guy, Thomas Sowell. I'm sure he agrees with me.
I was so lucky. I at the time I had no clue about all this. I left home in 1948. Many decades later, I learned that the unemployment rate among black teenagers in 1948, 16, 17-year-olds, was 9.4%. Among whites, so same age, it was 10.2%. So both blacks and white teenagers had only a fraction of the unemployment that they have today.
You were expected to work. You were expected to be able to get a job.
And more importantly, the jobs were there for you. What this is because of a fluke, really. The minimum wage law in the United States, Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, was passed with specified rates of pay that you're supposed to get. Almost immediately, inflation took off during the 1940s. So by 1948, those numbers that were in the law were meaningless.
Oh, I see.
In other words, when I started out as a Western Union messenger, the minimum wage was 40 cents an hour. I started out at the bottom at 65 cents an hour. So it was the same as if there was no minimum wage. And this is what happened. You had this, I was so lucky. I knew, of course, had no clue about any of this. Now a black kid 20 years later comes in there. People have become compassionate. They've raised the minimum wage, so he can't get a job.
Got it.
And I don't think it does any community any good to have a whole lot of teenage males hanging around on the streets with no job and nothing to do.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe, but we're talking about the Bay Area, San Francisco. I mean, I'm sure nothing can go wrong there when you've got a whole lot of young people and teenagers hanging around on the streets without a job with nothing to do. But hold on, he can't. Now, this Thomas Sowell, this is just a one-off, right? He doesn't really know what he's talking about. Everybody knows that the only way to increase employment in the black community is to increase the minimum wage. So Thomas Sowell has got to have that wrong, right? Because it just makes sense. You see, racist employers want to pay these black employees the smallest amount of money possible. And the only way they will pay a fair living wage is for the government to force the minimum wage to go higher and higher and higher. And that will help the black community, right? Everybody knows that. Democrats have been telling me that for years. So let's get a different opinion. We'll get a second opinion. And this guy, he's black. Walter Williams. Let's hear him explain it to us.
In 1972, white construction workers, unskilled construction workers, were making $1.91 an hour. And firms were hiring black construction workers to do the same job for 39 cents an hour. So what was the incentive of contractors? Was hire black workers because they were cheaper. And so the unions figured, Well, if they can make black workers just as expensive as white workers, they would improve their bargaining position. So the minimum wage law has two dramatic effects so far as human beings are concerned. It discriminates against low-skilled employment, and it lowers the cost of discrimination. That is, whenever you deny people the right to lower the price for what they sell or raise the price for what they buy, you make the less preferred person worse off. Let me give you another example, just a really quick example. Suppose you saw a fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking man married to a beautiful young lady. What kind of prediction would you make about that man's income? You guess it's pretty high. What is he doing? He's telling the beautiful young lady, look, I can't compete for your hand on the basis of a guy like Williams. So I'm going to... So he says, I'm going to offset my handicap by offering you higher prices. Now, some of you would say, well, is it fair for beautiful young ladies to treat fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking men differently than handsome men? And you say, no, we're going to make a law. And you make a law that beautiful women had to treat fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking men just like they treat handsome men. Then, after you make a law such that, what happens to the probability of a fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking man marrying a beautiful young lady? It goes to zilch, because you've taken away his most effective means of competing with the more preferred person. It's the same thing setting minimum prices. You deny less preferred people the most effective tool for competing with more preferred people. That is, just look at filet mignon and chuck steak. How does chuck steak compete with filet mignon? It goes for a lower price. And if you had an equal steak law, then people would buy all filet mignon and chuck steak would sit on the shelves.
Maybe I was wrong about that whole $500 an hour minimum wage thing. Now that I think about it, and now that I've actually educated myself, something clearly Representative Barbara Lee and most of the Democrats in this country, especially in leadership, refuse to do. Now that I've actually learned something from great intellectual minds like Thomas Sowell and the late, great Walter Williams, now I've realized something. Barbara Lee, by proposing a $50 minimum wage, is an economic moron. And even better, because as we've just learned, the minimum wage actually drives unemployment in the Black community higher. History shows us, and as it just got explained to you beautifully, not only is Representative Barbara Lee of California running for Senate an economic moron, but she's also a racist.